Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, May 2nd, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at an updated 2022 United States Senate election prediction. We are now in a position where in just 6 months we will be hitting the November elections. We will know by the end of 6 months from now who will be in control of the United States Senate and Congress altogether. And it will be a very interesting time frame between now and then, with a number of primaries occurring, including tomorrow's primary in Ohio, where a hotly contested Senate Republican primary is set to occur. There's going to be a lot more information, so starting now, we are actually going to be releasing updates every 2 weeks on the United States Senate as new primaries are set to occur, as primaries are going to be extremely contentious, but likely going to solidify who the nominees are going to be. I'm very excited to reach this position where now we are in a bit of a transition between the primary season and the general election going full force into November, which means that we do need to experience a few more updates than we otherwise would normally see. I've been making these videos talking about the Senate election predictions for quite some time now. If we take a look back at my old videos, you'll find that my first one was actually December 2020. So I've been looking at the 2022 Senate races for quite some time now, and it will be very interesting to go ahead and continue to take a look as time progresses. Now, this Senate election prediction is not necessarily one that should shock too many people. I will say there is going to be a race rating change that does flip a state from one party to the other. I'm not so sure people will be able to immediately guess what it is. We've been looking at this prediction from the side of Inside Elections, Larry Sabato's crystal ball, the Cook Political Report, even Politico. I've been looking at a number of numbers from Politico. I've been looking at the Race to the White House website. I've been taking a look at the Morning Consult polls to take a look at the individual approval ratings for many of these senators. There's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot that has been thought about on my end before I've actually made this video. And it's taken me a good amount of time to actually solidify on some of these calls, 6 months leading into the election. So looking at where we are now at 35 toss-up seats. A year ago, we were at 34 simply because Oklahoma now has a special election. That's actually going to be the first state we characterize simply because it was never meant to occur in coinciding with this election, and it's a safe Republican seat. We're going to start off by characterizing all of the safe states for either political party, and I think many of these states, we really don't see many surprises. A bunch of them are going to be characterized as safe straight off the bat, including Missouri, Indiana, Iowa, South Carolina, Alaska, Kentucky, Kansas, states that might have been previously thought about as competitive, but not so much at this point in time. Utah, I want to take a closer look at in another video. Even further, I also want to wait on some more opinion polling data to come out. Now that we know for a fact there will not be a Democratic nominee from the state of Utah, they will be endorsing and have endorsed conservative Evan McMullin, someone who ran for president in 2016 as an independent, who got about 21% of the vote statewide in a presidential election. So we'll see what happens when he has the combined force of the Democratic Party and Republicans who are upset with the incumbent senator there, Mike Lee, who has closely associated himself with President Donald Trump. But for right now, I'm going to characterize it as a safe Republican seat, but time will definitely tell us more about this situation. Moving beyond it, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, Iowa, Kansas, South Carolina were mentioned because at different points in time over the past 2 decades, they've been considered to be competitive. At different points in time, they've had Democratic senators here. It is interesting to see, but for right now, for the sake of 2022, based off of where our national environment currently stands, we're going to actually go ahead and head over to the generic ballot. You will see that the Republican Party very much has a lead, and that will mean that these states, which are traditionally safe Republican, are also going to stay that way as well. Let's go ahead and continue on further. So we have the safe Republican states, which puts the Republican Party at 44 Senate seats, actually 45. I forgot the state of Alabama for just a moment. The Democratic Party, of course, has their own safe states. Now, Oregon is a state that I've definitely been thinking about as potentially becoming a likely state, such as the state of Washington. I will characterize that one momentarily. The reason why I don't for right now is because I haven't seen any data telling me that it will be a likely state. In 2020, Washington and Oregon very well could have been likely states had Donald Trump won the presidential election, but since Joe Biden did, they ended up moving over from the likely column. Both states were likely back in 2016. So really just depends on the national environment. Considering where we are right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon ended up getting marginally competitive, meaning it's less than 15%, but truly Republicans stand no chance at victory there. It just merely will be narrowed down to where we are at this point in time. So that leaves about 11 toss-up seats, toss-up in air quotes, because not every single one of these races is going to be competitive or going to be a very close race to watch. As you might expect, Washington is probably going to be a very solid state for the Democratic Party, just merely will be a 13-14 point victory, which is why soundbites in the likely column. That puts the Democrats at 45. I would also like to say the Democratic Party has another likely state that they can characterize straight off the bat, which is the state of Colorado. I mean, if you take a look at Colorado, it definitely deserves this characterization as likely Dem, simply because Michael Bennet is just exceptionally popular, and popularity is a very big thing when it comes down to the United States Senate. I would also like to say that the Joe Biden margin of victory from 2020 is too much for the GOP to get rid of. When we saw a 12-point shift in the state of Virginia, that meant that many swing states from 2020 were going to be under that same type of margin shift, easily Republican states. But Colorado simply wasn't one of them. Even though New Mexico might have been, Colorado is a state that voted for Joe Biden by 13.5 of essentially 14%. If you were to shift the state by 12 points, Democrats would still win. And Michael Bennet is currently approved of by about 16 points statewide, which is a very good sign for the Democratic Party in the state of Colorado as for solidifying that race. It used to be much more competitive than it currently is. So that moves us over into the likely GOP states. As for this state, I guess two individual states, which shouldn't be surprises really at all. The state of Ohio is the first state I'm going to characterize as likely Republican. I do want to say that depending on who wins the nomination tomorrow, it will be quite interesting. We really haven't seen too much data coming out of the state that shows us a very good amount of a lead for either candidate here. What we find is that in the election here, let's go ahead and see if we can find some primary polling data. Maybe it won't show us here on Real Clear Politics. Republican primary, I guess not, surprisingly enough. But Josh Mandel and J.D. Vance, James Tinkin, they are all in a position where the numbers really fluctuate. Josh Mandel and J.D. Vance definitely have taken a larger stance against, in comparison to other Republicans, are in a much better position, but they aren't exactly defeating each other by exceptionally large margins. I've been very unimpressed by the lack of ability for a frontrunner here, even with a Trump endorsement, to even provide some type of lead for any of these Republicans, and it looks very much like they are in disarray at this point in time. The most recent poll from the Republican primary shows J.D. Vance with a 4-point lead, Mike DeWine, the incumbent governor, here with a 20-point lead, which is expected but not necessarily the best for an incumbent governor. J.D. Vance at a 4-point lead on average. J.D. Vance wins by 3.5, nothing super substantial, I should say. Definitely not impressed by this result at all. But Tim Ryan, I also think, is a good candidate. I just think it's Trump country. I think the Republican Party is going to be pretty okay, especially if J.D. Vance ends up winning that nomination. He should be very good for the GOP, even if he is someone who the Democratic Party may not necessarily view as this extremely strong opponent. Tim Ryan is a strong Democrat, but at the end of the day, Ohio is Trump country. Ohio is a red state for right now, at least. The state of Florida is another state I'm going to characterize as likely. I don't think that should shock anyone. Main things, Marco Rubio is popular. Marco Rubio does very well amongst minority voters, won by 8 points in 2016 when Trump won by 1. Val Demings is a strong candidate, but this is simply not her year, and he's also going to be on the same ballot as Ron DeSantis, who is likely going to outperform him as well and do exceptional for the Republican Party in the state of Florida. So a lot of down ballot benefit for Ron DeSantis being at the top of the ticket there. For right now, we're going to characterize Florida as a likely Republican state. I think it's only fluctuated out of this position maybe once, in fact, probably never. For right now, Florida is definitely a likely Republican state. There has been some consideration about it being a safe state, but truly I think likely is where it really needs to be at this point in time. So now that we are down to the remaining 7 toss-up races, we have Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, New Hampshire, all swing states from the 2020 election, it becomes very interesting. The races here might surprise you. Some of these characterizations by the end of it might surprise you. You might be thinking, why is, Georgia this way, but why is another state the other way? Or why is Arizona this way, but another state is the other way? I mean, there are going to be some characterizations where you may not fully agree, and I'd like you to express that in the comments if you have any type of issue with some of the calls that I make. A lot of this comes down to a general consensus being built amongst different polling firms and different organizations that do ratings, taking a look at the approval ratings for many of these senators. I mean, we quite literally have every single senator's approval rating in the first quarter of 2022, or the second quarter, earlier on the month. It hasn't been the second quarter yet fully, so can't get the second quarter just yet. But the point is that where we stand right now, the numbers that we have received and a lot of the polling data that has already been released has gone into a lot of these characterizations, and it may seem a little weird to see, but I promise you that I hope it can make a little bit of sense. There's been a lot of thought that has gone certainly into all of these projections. So we'll start off in the Northeast, in the New England area, the state of New Hampshire, which I'm going to characterize as a lean Democratic seat. Now that doesn't change from my most recent projection, and the reason for that is very simple. Senator Maggie Hassan won in 2016 against Senator Kelly Ayotte, someone who I have referred to on many instances as an electoral juggernaut, won with over 60% in 2010, went into 2016 with leading in the polls and doing well in terms of approval, ended up losing by about 0.1. Maggie Hassan took her down. Maggie Hassan today stands at a plus 10-point net approval across the state. If you take a look at polls from the state of New Hampshire, things become more clear. While the lead here isn't exactly super large, the lead is still noticeable. Maggie Hassan is able to defeat many of these potential Republican nominees. She really only loses to one, and that's an individual poll. Now, I do want to say that it does show a tightening of the race, but her approval rating does also speak for itself. Considering that Chris Sununu is not running in the Senate race, where she was only losing by about 7 points, Chris Sununu is winning in the governor polls by about 30 to 40 points, I think it's I think there's a very good shot that Maggie Hassan does win in the state of New Hampshire. And considering that there isn't a clear consensus as to who this Republican nominee is going to be, in fact, the guy who has the likeliest chance right now, Doug Bolduc, is actually ending up in a bad position when it comes down to polling data, losing by one in the most recent one, but losing by others in other polls. I mean, you're not exactly seeing a super significant lead for the Republican frontrunner there right now. So we will see what happens in the primary, but for right now, it doesn't look like New Hampshire is on track to be one of these shining states for the GOP, whereas some other states definitely will be as we get through the rest of this map. The state of Wisconsin is the next state we're going to characterize. I guess we're going to go top down. Wisconsin is a state where Ron Johnson has really been getting lucky. And if he has proven us anything, it is that his approval rating simply does not matter. He wasn't approved of in 2016. He certainly isn't approved of now. But I do want to say that the polling data doesn't exactly suggest that the Republican Party is losing in the state of Wisconsin. The national environment is not on the Democratic Party side, and I want to remind you that Wisconsin went to Biden by less than 1 point. This wasn't some large victories such as Virginia or Colorado or New Mexico, or even a larger than a point victory such as Nevada or Michigan or Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was the closest Rust Belt state. It was the largest Rust Belt state for Trump in 2016. So when you start to see that all added up, including where we are nationally speaking, makes a lot of sense that the GOP would be winning in that state, especially with an incumbent. He has proven time and time again that approval rating does not matter, and I think he will very much prove it again in 2022, at least as we stand right now. For the state of Pennsylvania, I'm going to characterize this state as a tilt Democratic state. John Fetterman, as said by some of the Republicans on the debate stage there, I suggest you watch that, or at least partially if you would like to, the Republican Senate primary debate. They said John Fetterman was a strong candidate, and I do agree. I think looking at the fact that Pat Toomey, the incumbent Republican, is down about 7 points in approval, whereas the Democrat Bob Casey is up by about 7 points in approval, tells you that the current view of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, while Democrats may be in power nationwide and Biden might be down overall, the statewide elected officials, including the senators there, seem to see a better uptick for Democrats in the same exact position. In addition to that, you're going to be seeing this race on the same ballot as the governor's race, which is going to be potentially a Democratic victory with Josh Shapiro. At the end of the day, Pennsylvania, for right now, I think is a tilt Democratic state. I also think the GOP's inability to find a frontrunner and for the Trump endorsement to take any type of substantial effect in the Republican primary, not even, occurring. I think the state of Pennsylvania for right now is okay enough to be in the tilt Democratic column. As for the state of North Carolina, I'm going to characterize it as lean Republican. I think this makes sense. While Sherry Beasley is strong, she could not win in 2020 as a Chief Justice. She outperformed Joe Biden, but still narrowly lost. And the national environment back then was a lot different than it is right now. I do want to say that Ted Budd is that good nominee. He is the right nominee for the GOP, not Pat McCrory. Pat McCrory could very well lose the general election if a good type of environment is there. The Democrats won in 2016 in the governor election simply because you saw an unpopular Republican governor. If he comes back as someone who was rejected by the voters when they elected Donald Trump, they might reject him again. But right now, Ted Budd seems to be leading consistently in primary polling data, which means the Democratic Party is not in a good position when it comes down to these potential GOP nominees. Ted Budd is more than likely going to win it, and I do think that there's just so many things on the Republican Party side right now that North Carolina does end up going red. For the state of Georgia, which is technically neighboring the state of North Carolina, I'm going to keep it with its characterization as a tilt Republican state. I moved it down from lean previously, not this time, but a time before, because I think that Raphael Warnock does pose a more realistic probability at winning than Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is strong but I don't think this is her year. I also think she's a bit too nationalized in order to win. She's been seen excessively with Joe Biden. She was a major reason as to why he won Georgia in 2020, but she also had a voter turnout registration type of a movement that the Republican Party never had and was never able to really tap into until more recently. I think the Republican Party is definitely going to combat a lot of the work that she has done. I think Raphael Warnock losing overall on the average is a testament to something about Walker's electability actually being real, but I do think that because of the most recent polls from Warnock leading by 5, I do want to say that I'm looking at this with caution, but I do want to say as well that the GOP has the upper hand at this point in time, but that certainly can change as we progress. The next state I'm going to characterize is the state of Nevada. This is a state where Catherine Cortez Masto is the incumbent. Now, she's up in opinion polling data by 8 points. That sounds all good, right? But when you take a look at the numbers, that 8-point lead isn't exactly anything impressive. The 8-point lead is there, but it comes as a result of Catherine Cortez Masto being faced up against candidates with little to no name recognition across the state. I'm surprised by Adam Laxalt, but I don't think that he's certainly at 35%. I think Catherine Cortez Masto being at 42 to 43 is more of a testament to her as someone who is unable to win over voters, more than it is a testament to her ability to win, because she's up by 8, but keep in mind she's in the low 40s. I don't find that to be something beneficial. My ratings in the past few months have also been keeping Nevada as a Republican state, and I'm going to keep it in the tilt Republican column. I'm going to move it down from lean. I think that because of the most recent numbers, sure, I'll look at this and say maybe there is some reevaluation that needs to be made. I would also like to say that the state of Nevada itself could end up being just simply close because of historical reasons, the fact that it has been close in years past, but for right now I would say the Republicans still maintain the upper hand, and ultimately Catherine Cortez Masto does lose the general election against whichever Republican nominee is put forth. And in the final state, the state of Arizona, I said earlier on in this video that there will be a state that changes characterization. Previously, Arizona was a tilt Republican state, but now it is going to be a tilt Democratic state. Mark Kelly is a strong candidate. There's no real denying that. And Arizona is certainly not as ingrained in its red history as Georgia might be. Looking at the 2018 election results versus Georgia, I start to see why there's a difference between the two states. I see why Arizona was slightly a larger margin than Georgia was for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Mark Kelly also won by 2.4, when Biden only won by 0.3. There's a reason for that. Mark Kelly is better than Biden on the national level, compared to Biden when you're talking about a presidential election. Mark Kelly is also up by about 4 points in a number of polls, but most recently the one that shows him against a generic Republican nominee. The thing about the state of Arizona right now is that there isn't a clear GOP nominee. In addition to that, he's approved of by about 4 points. I can't exactly say that many other swing state senators or even non-swing state senators, just senators in states that were previously competitive or will be competitive in 2024 or 2026, are doing as well in terms of approval. In addition to that, Mark Kelly is a fundraising beast. He raised $11 million in the first quarter. That's a lot of money. That is a super significant amount of money. Mark Kelly has always been a very good fundraiser, and we're seeing it at full force for the 2022 midterms. So for right now, I would say the Republican Party still wins the majority, but the Democrats have a higher chance at victory in Arizona than I would say, at least I thought a month ago. Things can definitely change. Likely states probably won't. Safe states certainly won't. But lean and tilt states very well can, and probably will. That's the point of tracking these states over time, to see how the environment 6 months ago might have been different than where it is right now. I would encourage you to go ahead and check out map.jacksonjude.com to check out my previous projections, see how the race has changed over time. I am, interested to see how much actually changes more between now and November, but of course, we will find that every 2 weeks out from now. The state of the Senate right now is that the GOP has an advantage, but depending on who they nominate or don't nominate, that could either increase or decreases their chances of victory. And it looks like for right now, the Republicans still maintain their advantage, but things can absolutely change. Final map, 51 for the Republican Party, 49 for the Democratic Party. Democrats flip Pennsylvania, Republicans flip Nevada and Georgia for a net gain of 1, which puts them in the majority. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.